So we're here in Tinryland Hall. It's the 27th of August 2024 and we've just finished up a very important and exciting photographic display called Tinryland Past and Present for Heritage Week 2024. And I have here with me Jim Deane, our local historian and county councillor, Eamon Byrne, expert on all the sports in the locality, and John Ryan from the Heritage Group 2024, whose initiative putting on this exhibition was. So we're going to start with the first exhibit, which was Rediscovering Linkerstown Church and Graveyard. There's the ruins of an old church and graveyard are up in Linkerstown, and back in 1943 a local farmer on this particular land, Jim Townsend was his name, and the land was owned at that stage by Larry Byrne. It's now owned by Jimmy Townsend's son, Clem Townsend. Back at that stage, when they were ploughing the land, they disturbed a slab, a granite slab, and when they investigated further, they found an old grave with a skeleton and some items like a pottery and an axe head. And when these went to the National Museum, it turned out that they were over 5,000 years old, belonging to the Neolithic age, which is 3000 BC, over 5,000 years ago. In Linkerstown at the moment, we still have the ruins of the church and the graveyard. And back many years ago, I'd say it was probably in the 60s maybe, Ronnie Dowling actually recorded all the the legends on the gravestones, and we have them preserved in an article here. So moving on then, I can just show you some of the pictures of the Linkerstown graveyard and some of the exhibits that were found there. After that then we're moving on, and I'm going to ask Jim to talk to you about St. Willibrord.
It's Maureen. The site at Clonmelch, or Rathmelchig as it was formerly known, where a monastery once stood to, I suppose it was a centre of learning in 690, about 1,300 years ago. St. Willibrord studied here for 12 years. He came originally from Northumberland and led a mission here of study. He is now the patron saint of Luxembourg. And at this site in Rathmelchig, this is the ancient cross that still stands there. And maybe every year or every second year, a group from Luxembourg come here and perform a ritual dance in memory of their patron saint, St. Willibrord. It is reported that he had a cure for epilepsy and I suppose many other things. But this is a famous site in our area, and as you can see, we have members from Erchternacht and Luxembourg who are very proud to come here and visit the site of St. Willibrord.
And Jim, this site is actually on private land, the land of the Deacon family, I understand. Yes. So it's not really accessible to the public. Okay, so we're moving on now then to our connections with Disney.
Yeah, in the same area at Clonmelch, the Clonmelch Cemetery, the remains lie of the ancestors of Walt Disney, who we have here. And the first Disney came to England in 1170. That's as far as we can trace back. And he was a gentleman by the name of Robert Disney. And the town Disney is where they originated from in France. But Robert Disney came and he fought with military in Britain, and later came to Ireland and settled. Some of the Disneys settled in Kilkenny, some settled in Dublin, and some settled in Carlow. But the gravestones of Walt Disney's ancestors are located here at Clonmelch Cemetery, and it's his great-great-grandparents are buried here, Robert Disney. It attracts not as many visitors as we would like, but some Americans visit this area.
And again, Jim, what sort of condition is this in at the moment in 2024?
It's not bad at the moment, thanks to some local people who have an interest in it and keep it maintained. The graves are, you can still read the graves, but also located in the cemetery is the vault of the Butler family, and they have connections with the Ormonds of Kilkenny and Kilkenny Castle. Sir Thomas Butler is interred in the vault here with his family members, and some of those family resided nearby in Clonmelch, in Gary Hunden House, and Pierce Butler was one of the signatories of the American Declaration. He stood for office in America, in North Carolina, and he was an advisor to, I think, 2 presidents, Presidents Monroe and Jefferson.
Thanks, Jim. There's a photograph down here. It's not in fantastic condition, but it actually, let me just go to this side, it actually shows a train pulling into Milford Station. Now, Milford Station, a train stopped in Milford Station up to the late 60s, I believe, 1962, and basically they were used to take produce from the mill at Milford and the Alexander family, and to take that produce throughout the countryside. We're moving on now to 1798. Jim, I'm going to ask you to come back and have a little chat about 1798.
Yeah, 1798 was, I suppose it was a very turbulent time in Irish history, and in 1998 there was a commemoration committee formed to explore and remember and commemorate the events and the people locally that were involved. So during the research it was discovered that one prominent local person was Peter Ivers, and he was the head of the local 98, or the United Irishmen in Carlow. He was a very prominent figure. At a meeting in Oliver Bond House in Dublin in the lead up to the Battle of Carlow in May 1798, Peter Ivers and 13 others were arrested at Oliver Bond House. Word had got out that they were meeting there to plan a rebellion or an insurrection, but Ivers was spared with his life and he was sent to Australia. Now, the Ivers family are reported to have lived in the Tinryland area, and we believe on the lands of Paul Moore. Peter Ivers was sent to Australia in 1798. He was 25 years of age. The insurrection failed in Carlow in May, and over 620 people were killed in that Battle of Carlow. We did try to trace relatives of Ivers, and eventually we found some descendants living in New Zealand. But that's all we know at the moment of Peter Ivers.
And Jim, isn't it true to say that that's in 1798, the parochial house, I think, was in Ballinaccarrig, near the graveyard in Ballinaccarrig, and rumour or story has it that the parish priest of the time came out on the road in Ballinaccarrig and appealed to them not to go marching into Carlow town, and unfortunately they walked right into a trap in the town. That's true. Moving on from, and we have a lovely stone for 1798 down in the lower end of the Moat Hill, which commemorates the 200th anniversary of 1798, and it was erected in 1998. Moving on from that, I'm not sure if you can see this, Greg, there's a lovely photograph down here of a Miss Iona MacLeod arriving to the school with a pony and trap. She was the librarian at the time, and she was coming to the school with library books. And just below that we have Seamus Hayden working with a horse, obviously pre-tractor time. So they're not lovely photographs to have in our collection. So that we're moving on then swiftly from that. We're into the Ballybar races, Jim. The Ballybar races were like Cheltenham back in the 17th century. It's on the land of the Kelly family of Ballybar, and there's still an old ruin of the stand in Ballybar. It's a ruins, but we have one fabulous photograph. It's not in great condition, but it gives you an idea of the crowds that actually attended. They came to Milford, I believe, on the train. They came with ponies and traps and coaches, and there were people who there was a tote there. There was obviously stands, etc., to view the racing, and it was very popular up until I think it was the early 1900s. and we have some lovely photographs from that time. And then a little bit about the famine years in Tinryland, although we understand that Tinryland escaped quite well from the famine because of the labour that was around the place, and we obviously had enough food to survive. Now, 1916, the village commemorated 1916. The school children learned all about 1916 in 2016, and they drew some lovely postcards at the time commemorating it. We have a nice little garden across from the church, so that with lovely roses representing the people who were executed in 1916. At that time as well, Carlow GEA held a reenactment of a county final from 1916, and it was Tullow versus Tinryland, and the Tinryland team at the time wore the jerseys that were worn back at that stage to commemorate it, and we have a copy of the programme and the teams that played. Down here we have photographs of the Rockland House, which is the residence of the Moore family now in Tinryland, and some old ones and some new ones, because that's actually a preserved building. We'll move on now to Father Edward Campion, and Eamon is going to talk to you about that.
Yeah, Father Edward Campion was a curate in Tinryland in the early part of the 20th century, and he became a very political priest, and he got involved with trying to get back land that had been taken from Irish people in years before that, and he was quite successful. And he spent 10 years in Tinryland before he was moved to Grey Cullen, and then he eventually became parish priest of Kill in County Kildare. Paddy Dowling was the top man in the ESB, and he was really the man who was responsible for the introduction of rural electrification, and Tinryland was one of the first rural areas to be electrified, and it was a phenomenal happening at the time. In this particular hall where we are, there were hundreds of people the night it was launched.
And another local man was very involved with Paddy Dowling in the electrification. That was Paddy Costello, and he came to the locality working for the ESB. And believe it or not, Jackie Stratton was also very involved in it as well. And he tells us that the first official house to get electricity was Kevin Jordan's, but a few hours before that happened, Willie Rose's house had actually been connected, and by the time they officially connected Kevin Jordan's, the main workers were halfway down a bottle of whiskey. So moving on from that then, Eamon, we have members of the local defence.
That's known as the LDF. They were the forerunner to the FCA, and these are some local guys. Jim Deane, Jim Murphy, Mick Deane and John Byrne, and in the front you had Paddy Deane, Martin Murphy, John Murphy, and they were all from Kyle Ballyhue. And this was a product of World War II, and they did some manoeuvres, and there were a local defence force that eventually became the FCA. And the FCA hut, of course, was the one that was the first clubhouse in Tinryland. So, and below here then we have the founder members of the Carlow Farmers Mart, which is still going strong, and a lot of local guys. Colm O'Quigley was the school teacher for years here, Joe McGrath, Jim Walsh, Park, Eric Cole, Michael Roach. In the front then, Jim Cole, Brendan Dowling, Nat Cole and Reggie Marr. We're now here at the Tinryland GFC exhibit, and a club really rich in history, formed in 1888 and still going strong. And we have numerous exhibits there. We have a copy of our 100 years history. Some of the early officers of the club, Ned Hayden, Tom Cummins and Jim Byrne. We have the editorial committee from the book. We have the famous draw that for two houses that helped to extend the club. We have winning teams, the first under-21 team to win in 67, the early teams from the golden era from the mid-30s up to 1950, and the second golden era then was from 1971 up to 1981, and that was the last time Tinryland won a senior football championship. We've a lovely picture there of Pat and Jackie Doyle, who both played together on the Tinryland junior team back in the late 60s. And we have a lovely picture of one of our great officers, John Scott, with Peony Whelan, accepting the Sporting Hero Award on behalf of Tinryland senior team. And we have a picture there of Mickey Whelan with his niece Rita, showing off the Railway Cups and the Leinster medals. And David Byrne and Mick Curran and David Power showing off the under-21 and senior championships that were both won in 1979.
And I see here a picture of Andy Murphy receiving the 1946 Senior Cup after Tinryland beating Ballymurphy. That's a very precious photograph to have. Micheál Hertig has visited the club on a number of occasions, and he's pictured here with Peony Whelan and Eamon Byrne at Áras Nuachtaráin. Bernadette Scott presenting the John Scott Trophy to one of our younger players, Jonah Dunn. We're moving on to the church now, Greg, and the church is celebrated the bicentenary of the church in 2019. So this particular building came about in 1819, and we have some pictures of the inside of the church as it is currently, obviously, but we have a lovely one outside the church here from 1901, and we've three gentlemen dressed very well in the photograph. We're pretty sure one of them on the right is Mr. Brophy, the school teacher, and that the other one of the others is Pat Shine, a school teacher of the time as well. This is a photograph of the church pre the 1974 revival, and this is it today. And we have some photographs here of when we celebrated the bicentenary in 2019. We also have some photographs of the works that went on in 1974. We have some beautiful stained glass windows in the church. Some ones that are quite old, that practically go 100 years old. One in particular is probably the most famous, but they're all beautiful. The Miles Keogh window is quite famous, which is to Miles Keogh, who was killed at the Battle of the Little Bighorn with Custer. But we have some lovely modern stained glass windows as well that went in 1974 in the Blessed Sacrament Chapel. Outside the front of the church, we have a baptismal font that came down from Linkardstown, the ruins of Linkardstown Church, and credit to Jimmy Townsend for arranging to bring that down. Our holy water fonts in the three porches date back to 1787, and we have some lovely candelabra that were provided to us for shrines, candle shrines that were provided to us back in I think it was in the 60s by the Ryan family of Ballybar. This is Kathleen O'Neill with some of her peers at her retirement as sacristan of the church. Herself and her mother and grandmother before her would have given over 100-year service as sacristans to the church. And this one down here is former parish priest Father John McAvoy when he became Monsignor with the bishop. We move along then to St Mary's Church in Staplestown, Church of Ireland's church in Staplestown. This is actually it's a fabulous church. It has some beautiful ornate windows and statues and items of interest. Again, and they celebrated their centenary 2 years after St Joseph's Church did in 2021 with a big occasion as well. In that locality as well, we had a little group called the Four Roads Development Association, where the community of Staplestown and Ballycrow came together to keep the area in good order, like a tidy towns. We have a choir in the parish church for going back a long, long time, and everybody will remember Jack McCardle, who was the choir master there for 40 years, I'd say, at least. And the choir is still running today, and his daughter Pauline would be the choir mistress. This particular photograph is a nice, interesting photograph. It's of one of our parishioners, Mick Keogh, who happened to visit the battle of where the Little Bighorn took place. So he was able to bring us back first-hand word of where Miles Keogh was actually killed. We have a few very interesting photographs from the school. Where we stand here today in the parish hall was the old boys' school, as far as I can recall, and this photograph depicts that here on the right hand side, and on the left hand side, where the ball alley used to be, was the girls' school, and they were the only schools in the village until 1932. And we have some lovely photographs of pupils from back then, from 1905, of boys and girls. We had a very successful reunion of Tinryland National School in 1995 that over 500 people came to. This was the school before it was restored in 2022, I think it was, when it was reorganised, and that's a picture of it before that. This is the parochial house during the snow. This picture here is of what was the school teacher's house, and it's in the village of Tinryland, opposite Deane's house. Our pump has been there for a long time, and it's a lovely landmark to have in the village. And O'Neill's house, before it was restored, was a lovely thatched house, and we're very lucky to have that photograph there. Going back to Staplestown, obviously hundreds of years ago there was a settlement in that area, a whole village of Staplestown that St Mary's Church would have been the central focus of, and it goes toward Bennycarry House would be in that locality as well, and the river, of course, the River Barrow went through the River Byrne, the River Byrne went through that particular locality as well. So these are just some photographs of the schools as it was restored in 2023, and it's an absolutely fantastic, beautiful school today with lovely grounds, lovely playgrounds, and plenty of parking and very safe area. Going back here, this is an old picture coming from 1959 of a gift that was being presented to Colm O'Quigley, who was principal in the school for many years, and his wife Rita, and this was members of first and second class at the time in 1959. And this is another picture from 1959, and lots of people were able to recognise themselves from that picture. The school is a vibrant place today, and that's what this is representing. This is Father Little with two of the school teachers, Bredeen Keane and Orla Hennessy, and obviously some of the children. Down here is a very interesting photograph of Father Dunny, and Father Dunny with his horse, and obviously he had a great interest in the land at the time. And if I'm not mistaken, Jim, he was renowned for taking a dip every day in a very ice cold tent.
Yeah, some of the residents used to say every morning he used to take a dip in a water tank, which I remember at the back of the house, a circular tank. And there was a story one time, somebody was looking for a priest, and Father Dunny used to strip off, and he had his clothes on the bottom of a bit of a small ladder, and somebody came and they got word for Father Dunny, but he happened to leave his old clothes at the bottom of the ladder. So the second person that came looking for Father Dunny raised the alarm that they thought he was drowned in the tank, but Father Dunny had already left on his priestly duties to attend somebody that required his assistance. But he was a hardy bloke. A gardener there once told me that in the winter time he used to break the ice with a rock on top of this tank and dip down for a few minutes and get back up.
Thanks, Jim. So we're moving on now to the parish hall. The parish hall has gone through a number of iterations over the years, and it had fallen into disrepair back in the 70s, and the Feroga group back then consisting of Deane, Brenda Murphy and Shea Byrne, and a group of other people took it on and restored this particular hall so that it could be actually used. And they went forward for a Ferroigus Mochrana, as it was at the time, Citizenship Award, and they won an award, a national award for it at the time. After that restoration, it was possible to use the hall then as an overflow classroom for the school, and was used into the 80s as that. But then it fell into disrepair again, and these are some of the photographs that you can see of it in disrepair, and a group in the parish got together again, and under Father McAvoy's leadership, I think, back around 2009, Jim, and restored the hall, and it's been up and running since then and been very widely used. Then in 2015, we entered the Pride of Place for County Carlow, and we had a magnificent day here in the village, showing the judges around. We really showcased the whole village, from the trees down on the Ballybar Road, down all the way through the village, the school, the church, the hall, over to down to the 1798 monument, over to the lovely garden at the Cairns Cross, and then down to the GFC Centre. And we actually got an award for that. We won an award at the national event in Ennis for that. Let me see, and there's been some other awards obviously since for Pride of Place, because there's a lot of work going on with Tinryland Park, with the Tidy Towns, with the development group, and obviously here is down at the trees where Jimmy Townsend was involved in sowing a lot of these, and the beekeepers are involved in making sure it's environmentally friendly. So Tinryland ICA was actually formed in 1949. We have a lovely photograph here from the some of those early days from 1950. We have Mrs. Ager, Mrs. Shirley, Connie Jeffers, Alice Cole, who was Mrs. Nat Cole, Mrs. Purser, Pat Roach, Maudie Dowling, who's Mrs. Brendan Dowling, Tess Marr, and Molly Conroy, and Mrs. Cole, Betty Cole was here. That was Eric Cole's mother. And so we have lovely photographs from going way back in the years from the ICA. One that took a lot of people's interest during the exhibition was this particular one, where the ICA ran a garden a fete up in Linkertstown House, in the Dowling House, and the school children were invited to it. And this was back in the probably in the late 50s to 60s, early 50s, and people at the exhibition were able to pick themselves out as the school children who attended there, and we have the names of some of the adults that were there as well. So we have a rich community. Down here, some of the pictures from our community fundraising here by the Moore family with a lorry race. We have some various awards by various people. The Pope's visit to the Croke Park, we had a lot of people attended that.
Display board, we have music and arts, and Tinryland has had a great rich tradition in music and the arts, going way back to pre-television days, when concerts and plays were staged in the Long Hall, which was in the middle of the village, and a lot of concerts and plays were staged there over the years. Later on, Tinryland has got a reputation for being very good in competing in tops of the town, and they've competed in numerous tops of the towns at both county and regional level. And there are also a number of musical groups who have evolved out of Tinryland, and I see there Gogglebox, a couple of Tinryland lads, Eric Doyle and Greg Murphy, have been on Gogglebox Ireland for the last 3 or 4 years, and they're still involved in that weekly show. And we also then have some young communicators of the year. Niamh Walsh won a national award. And we have a band, the Tropical Show Band, a local man, Pascal Tomlinson, was a member there. Another band, we have young Robert O'Neill, the man who was the leading man for the variety groups and all the great pantomimes that are staged in the George Bernard Shaw. He's pictured there with our ex-president, Mary McAleese, and her husband. And
we had an old dramatic society in the community. Back in the 40s and 50s, drama was a huge interest in the place, and we had many plays put on in what was then known as the Long Hall, which no longer exists. And I believe they were packed to the rafters, and the refreshments were served in this particular hall at the time. So people remember the concerts, Troubled Bachelors that were on at the time, and there was a very famous Lourdes play, the Song of Bernadette, I think, that people remember still, that was staged at that time. So moving on, then we have a number of people who met pictures with the president. We have Pádraig Kelly, who was a teacher in the Gael Colashta, who met and who was involved with the Lions Club. We have Breda Brennan Murphy, who was Queen of the Plough back in 2004, and her son won some ploughing competitions and is involved in ploughing to this day, her son John. Down here we have Fergal Costello, one of the Costellos of Castletown, and he's involved in film production, and he won a BAFTA for his work. So down here we have a lovely picture, a nighttime picture of the Christmas lights that two families in the parish erect every year for some charities. Recently they did it for Aist, and that is the Walker family and the Matthews families in Kilmeeny. And then we have a picture of, Tom Murphy here at some event. I'm not quite sure what event it was. And this is Eamon and Peony representing the GEA with Mary McAleese at the Oris as well. Further down we have a picture of Pat and Joan Curran's 50th wedding anniversary, and it's great because we have a photograph there of a number of our former priests, Father Sean Hyland, Father Liam Morgan, Father Tom Little and Father Alex, who I believe has gone back to India now.
We have another sports board here now, and not just Gaelic football takes part in Tinryland. We have sports such as athletics, ladies football, soccer and badminton highlighted on this display board. And of course Tinryland Athletic Club, one of the main clubs in the parish for the last 50 years. It has a rich history. It is winning over 35 Carlow Senior Cross Country Championships. We have a little poster there for one of the earlier sports meetings promoted by Tinryland Athletic Club, which took place in Tinryland GAA Club. And on that day we have the founder members of the Athletic Club, Paddy Byrne, Jim Salter and Sean Delaney. I suppose the man who really inspired the whole Athletic Club was Dennis Shannon, a former teacher here who arrived in the late 60s. He's a former All-Ireland senior and junior cross-country champion. And here we have information about the Rockford Roof Tile Road Race, which was one of Ireland's leading road races for 40 years, and it only came to an end during COVID. It was always sponsored by Dan Morrissey Limited, and that it attracted the elite runners from not alone Ireland but from the British Isles and further afield. And here we have a picture of young juvenile athletes from the early 70s, and we have Adam Murphy here, the Ballyloo Bullet, one of Ireland's leading sprinters at the moment. And on his left is another Tinryland man, Pádraig Webb, who has been burning up the roads. And here the picture there is of him winning a race in the USA. So we move on then to ladies football. Bennykerry Tinryland Ladies Club, very prominent for the last 20 years in Carlow ladies football. They're the current Carlow ladies senior and junior football champions, and they're doing a lot of work, and they're based in Tinryland GAA Club. We have soccer here, St. Joseph's team, who had a very good year in 2022. Some names there: Pádraig Webb, Daniel Dunnigan, Evan Maguire, Jack Murphy, and down below we have Conor Byrne, who plays with New Oak. He won a Player of the Year award some years ago in Carlow. And here we have handball, the handball club, which is attached to the GAA club, also a very strong club, and has competed at national and provincial level and have won numerous awards. And this year, in the year of 2024, they're actually hosting part of the World Handball Championships in Tinryland. And some of the men there, the leading men that have kept the handball going, Martin Clancy, Eamon Sunderland, Mick Doyle, and PJ Donovan. They're men who are really keeping handball going. Kevin Barrett there has been very successful as a handballer as well. And over here then we have badminton. Was a big sport in Tinryland for a while. It's no longer as active now, but we have Tinryland Badminton Club from the late 80s. Eilish Costello, Anne Townsend, Pauline Barrett, Jim Townsend, Clem Delaney, and Eddie Townsend among others. And here we have Tess Delaney, who was one of the greatest tennis players in Leinster back in the 50s, and she was a really elite tennis player, and she's also from Tinryland village. So that's we have Paddy Byrne there competing in the New York Marathon.
So this board was to represent the businesses in the locality. There was a directory done earlier in 2024 of all the businesses that are involved in the locality, and that's available for all the newcomers to the area. This particular one represents Series Cakes, who are a huge employer in Tinryland. This one is SBE Electrical, who just celebrated their 40th anniversary earlier this year. They're down in Ballinaccarrig. And there's this one here is Walsh's Orange Juice, and they're another big employer in down in Park. Up here we have the first meeting that was called to discuss putting on something for Heritage Week, and to discuss a podcast of heritage that is going to be made later in the year and made available for people to access online. So we have a number of photographs from that. And down here we have about Soontree, which is one of our Montessori schools in the locality, and some of the children that are going there.
Just here is Tiny Park House, located just on the outskirts of Tinryland village, and it was the former residence of the MacDonald family, and Dr. MacDonald was the county coroner. Down through the years, it's now the residence of the Purcell family, but at Tiny Park, the MacDonalds used to host many games of tennis and other social events of the time. But in the early years, there was polo played here and cricket. Horace Rochford of Clogrennan was the founding member of the Carrow Cricket Club, but he also staged many games here, and that continued for many years. I suppose one of the most exciting events of the time that we recall was in 1905. Queen Victoria and some of her entourage used to come here and visit, but her son visited one year, Edward, to play polo and cricket, but they also had other engagements in Carlow and visited Clogrennan. But at the time it was understood that he was the Prince of Wales, but he was actually the King of England. So they played here and were entertained by those people at that time. Tinryland GAA also enjoyed many happy years here and won 6 of their senior titles. They were based here in the polo field at Tiny Park. They trained here during the 1940s, and it was a very successful period for Tinryland Club, renting land here for a small fee. And this also has a link to GAA in Tinryland, which we're very proud of. This pavilion was actually erected at Tiny Park to accommodate people that came to view cricket and the gentry, and it was moved to Knockbeg College, and when Knockbeg was being restored in the 1980s, the cricket club was demolished. But at its time, it was a fairly adventurous place, but we were proud, I suppose, with the association, in particular with the GA.
So one thing I was never aware of was that we had a camogie team in the parish circa 1935 to 39, and we've one priceless photograph from that era. A number of the names that just jump out at me would be Polly Brannigan, who would have been a sister of Mrs. Del Deane, and another sister was Peg Brannigan, and I think that is Bernadette Scott's mother. And also there was a lady here the other day, Anne Whitaker was her mother, and I see a Delaney lady here as well, so I'm sure that's a relation of the Delaney family in Tinryland, and they're the only ones that jump out at me that I can recognise. John, Ryan and I would like to very much compliment and thank the Heritage Group, who were responsible for putting this together under the chairmanship of Liam Furlong John, Bernie O'Brien, who put a huge amount of work in gathering all of this material. A lot of it came from our reaching out books over the 27 years, and from the GAA centenary book, the Athletic Club centenary book, and various other publications we actually have in the parish. And Mary Ryan, who, and between a little small group of 4, pulled all this together really, and quite a lot of logistics went into it, and we're hoping that people who couldn't make the event over the weekend, we're hoping that when they see this video that they will enjoy it, and we have it for...
Yeah, we got great help as well and support from all the local people here, kind of, who gave us pictures and memorabilia that they had. And as you said, hopefully it'll be of interest to a wider community. What
we're hoping to do is that the people who are new to the community and the younger generation, that they will actually have something to look back on.
True, yeah.